Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another video. So this is going to be the updated Tri-Brigade Lyrilusc deck profile for the post-Spirits of Destiny format. And if you've been following my uploads for quite a while here, you'll know that I've been testing this deck quite a lot. And this is kind of the result of that testing. So if you're interested in seeing how this deck is supposed to play in action, you can check out my Road to 1000 Dual Book rating series, where I have a fair amount of matchups so far, and I'll continue to upload more matchups against different decks in the metagame. And if you are also interested in just learning the various different combos in a vacuum, I'll have a link to the combo tutorial. Both of those resources you can find in the description box below. So quite a lot has changed, but also a lot stayed the same, and I'll kind of just run through the deck list and the various choices that I have to make here. So if you do enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help the channel a lot. We're really close to 10K subs, so I would love to reach that by the end of the month if possible. So I would greatly appreciate it. But let's go ahead and just get started without any further ado. So the bird ratios actually have stayed the same from my previous list. So it's 3 Turquoise Warbler, 2 Barrow Canary, 2 Cobalt Sparrow, 2 Celestine Wagtail, and 1 copy of Sapphire Swallow. The only one I would really consider bumping up is the Barrow Canary, but for the most part, I've been enjoying these ratios a lot. I think Warbler is the universally inarguable one. Like, this is the one that is the best one to open in the majority of case hands, and it's just amazing by itself. Even if you open with a Tri-Brigade, most of those combinations of cards do work, so that's always nice. And she does technically work with any of the other Lyriluscs. You just have to reroute your combo slightly. As long as you open enough, like, of the other Tri-Brigades or just like various different combinations of level 1 winged beasts to work. So yeah, not too much to say about her. She is pretty phenomenal. The next one, Barrow Canary, is one that I have missed in various scenarios at 3. But I think as you deplete your resources in the extra deck, as the game goes on longer, this card becomes less of a powerful follow-up tool. It is good, certainly, like even mid to late game, but like if you set up a lot of your first turn plays, like you successfully go for your double recital into your Draco Future, and you have your Ensemble Robin, most of the time you're not going to have too many rank 1s to go for besides for your Zeus push. And you could argue that's maybe a reason to bump up Recital to 3, which I'll kind of talk about a bit later. But even at that point, you're investing a lot of resources into Xyz that are sort of redundant, and they don't achieve a ton in terms of winning you the game, apart from, again, just getting access to Zeus to maybe wipe boards if your board gets clear turn 1. So I found 2 to be fine. Like, you run through the turn 1 almost every time because you want to make Ensemble Robin, and then the second one helps you push for Zeus just in case, and the third one sometimes comes up, but I found that it only really comes up if, like, you open, I don't know, something like Turquoise Warbler plus Barrow Canary plus like Nerval or something. Then like maybe the third one comes up because, like, yeah, at that point maybe you want to special the Canary off the Warbler initially so that you can preserve your normal summon and like go from there. But those are kind of fringe scenarios. If you don't open with it, then you usually are able to just run through the 2 perfectly fine. And I haven't really run into too many issues with that, so I think it is perfectly okay at 2 here. Next one is Cobalt Sparrow, which I've debated on changing up the ratio of Sparrow and Wagtail from 2 and 2 to 3 and 1, which is fair enough because a lot of the times, like, Sparrow is the superior one to open. And I mentioned in the last profile that these cards are very comparable, and that's still true, but the major difference is like when you open Bird Call plus like Wagtail, and that's a really, really bad combination to open. I do have a combo in that big video where you can make that work still, but you do definitely want to make sure that the combinations of the cards you're opening are as live as possible. So like if you open like Sparrow plus Wagtail together, it's the same as opening double Sparrow anyways. So you can make the argument that, you could just go to 3 and 1 and then not really have the issue of really running into Bird Call plus Wagtail as much, which is something I've definitely tested around with and have considered. I haven't done enough testing with that ratio specifically to give a proper conclusion yet, and that's going to be one of my next phases of testing. This is by no means finalized. I don't think any deck list on YouTube is ever finalized. If people kind of say that, that kind of just means that they probably aren't going to like play the deck for a long amount of time, but I digress. This, like, whenever you play a meta deck, just kind of a side tangent here, like, it's always evolving to the metagame, whether it's through new sets or other people's innovations. So yeah, a deck is never really static. By the time you guys see this, maybe my list has already changed, so do keep that one in mind. But anyways, that's again a bit of a side tangent. So yeah, 2 Sparrow and 2 Wagtail is fine. You don't really want to clog on these. You have Fractals to get access to them, plus Tanky, Foolish, 1-for-1. So there's plenty of ways to get to them without actually having to hard draw them. And while hard drawing them is sometimes fine, you don't want to open up like too many of these. So yeah, I think 2 and 2 is still fine. You can even cut Wagtail down to 1, and that's okay. But I do find that like there are times where you have to like pitch one of these if you open with it off of, like Keras, and then you like banish it, and you really want the second one, which is like the other reason why I haven't gotten to 3-in-1 just yet. So I think this is still an okay ratio. You can test around with things, of course, if you find success with different ratios. But yeah, some people are playing like a much higher bird count, like 3 Barrow Canary, 3 Cobalt Sparrow, and like more of these even. But yeah, I just have found more success with playing a kind of like mid-sized package where you have enough for the grind if needed, but not so much that you have like an insane amount in your opening hand, which can be good if you have like a critical mass of them, especially if you open, like Warbler. But if you open like a lot of combinations of like these, it becomes a bit less good because there's some diminishing returns on what you can do since Barrow Canary does lock you. So those are all things to kind of keep in mind. And then the 1 Sapphire Swallow, I still am on just one of this. I really do think that it's extremely, extremely poor to open in a lot of cans where you don't have a ton of birds. If you want to play the higher bird count, then I think it's more justifiable because you're going to have those combinations of cards much more often. But she's a card that really contributes to your bad hands in this deck. So I really do think that she's the extender that you want to search, and that's about it. In the like 40 plus games that I played on Rated and Dueling Book, and like dozens more that I played off Dueling Book Rated with my friends in testing, the second one has come up exactly 1 time. So I really have not been missing this card. I think that is totally okay. She serves her purpose really well. She's a good card, but not necessary at more than 1. Next up is a Tri-Brigade package, which also has stayed the same. So it's 3 Fractal, 3 Nerval, 1 Kit, 1 Keras. So yeah, this is all fine. I actually dropped Nerval down to 2 for a little bit just to see, but when you're grinding with Tri-Brigades, you'll notice that like my extra deck is more Tri-Brigade focused for the mid to late game. You do run through the extra copies of Nerval quite a bit because you're always going through the first one in your combo. There are times where you have to like Fractal or open Fractal to like kind of get your play started. Like you open like Fractal plus Sparrow. Like that's where it comes up where like you send Nerval to add Keras or something. So that's when another situation where like Burning One comes up. And so yeah, for the grind game, you definitely do want the 3rd one. Plus like the native synergy with the Lyrilusc is too good to pass up on. And then yeah, these are still one-ofs. There are times where I do miss the 2nd Keras, I'll admit. But it's really not the best one to open with. So I've stuck with the 1 still. I don't really want to make my deck like super, I guess, contingent on those niche scenarios. I just want to build my deck to be as streamlined as possible and to be as consistent because a lot of the times, like even though you can find yourself in grind situations, I think other parts of the deck can make up for it. You still have a fair amount of Tri-Brigade names to get you going into your various like Omen plays, for instance. So the 2nd Keras, while a luxury, I think it is not a necessity. And then next up, this has changed. So I switched from Barrier Stature, the Stormwinds plus Rendezvous, to Avian and Oath, which I think is infinitely better. So I'll run through kind of all the reasons why. So the first thing is that the board with Barrier Statue is extremely weak to just spell traps in general. So like if you're playing against a back row deck or maybe like a matchup like Sky Striker or something, you'll find yourself having a hard time because you don't really have a lot to deal with those types of cards. And you find that like even though you have like the 1 card Fractal play, which ends you on like a pretty well protected Barrier Statue, that rarely actually comes up in practice. And you can see I actually cut Harpy Conductor from my extra deck as a result of that. A lot of the times you'll be opening one of your 10 Lyriluscs or like 5 other Tri-Brigades or like 6 other starter spells. There's so many other cards you can open with Fractal that it's so rare that you open this, like just this by itself. And so that play doesn't really come up super often. And even if it does, you can still end on Apex Avian if you just, Fractal send kits and Nerval, search Tri-Brigade, banish 3 for some more, and end on Apex Avian. It's not amazing, but it does get there. But additionally, you have Oath in here as another insurance against spells and traps, particularly main deck Droplet, which is extremely popular right now. And I think that it's a much more reliable hedge against it than something like Crossed Designator, which you'll notice is also absent from this list because this card is a much more accessible tool to get there. If you have watched my test hand video, which I'll also link in the description box below, I do 10 test hands where all of them I tried to get to Oath, and I did it in I think 8 out of the 10 test hands. So it's pretty consistent to get this card. And because people are, for I wouldn't say for the most part, but it's becoming a more popular trend for people to drop hand traps. You don't have to worry about getting interrupted as much, but what you do care about is your board getting broken by the powerful equalizers like Dark Ruler, Droplet, Lightning Storm, evenly Mystic Mine. So this helps with all of them except Mystic Mine, which is great. And then Apex Avian also is good against Mine too. So I just think that this package is a lot more well-rounded. It supplements what your board is already designed to do, which is just interact with monsters through Ensemble Robin, plus like DDL, and of course the Draco Future. This is just a nice natural supplement, and I think that it's a lot better just as the meta keeps evolving the way it is. So yeah, I definitely think it's super, super important that you try this package out at minimum. You could try Siding Oath if you're not comfortable maining it, but I do think that a lot of hands just get you to Oath straight up. So there's not really a whole reason not to play it. It's not very good going second, admittedly, but I'll take the one spot that's worse going second over just instantly losing to Droplet if I go first game one. So there's that. Next up, we have the starters and extenders. 3 Bird Call, again, ridiculous card, but I'll keep preaching this as time goes on. Opening this card is not the same as opening your search target because it does mess with the potential extension in what you want to summon, as well as just the utility of Wagtail later in the turn. So yeah, please just keep that in mind as you continue to play with this deck. I feel like a lot of people understand this, but yeah, I want to keep pushing it. Next, we have the Tenki, the Foolish, the 1-for-1, Call by the Grave. These, I think, are all pretty standard. I was actually testing cutting 1-for-1 for a while, admittedly, because there were certain hands where this card can be a little bit awkward to use. Plus, like, it's also somewhat redundant if you open well. Like, it doesn't really help you like advance your game state if you open already like your abundance of Lyriluscs, provided that you don't get stopped. But it still is just like another consistency piece. So there are times where when I cut it, I didn't have the starters needed. So opening or having the extra availability to open something really powerful, I think is just nice to have. And then next up is the defensives. So I'm on the 1 Crow still. I actually have been liking this card more than I thought I would going into this format. I thought this would just be a pretty weak, low-impact hand trap, and it is if you treat it as a hand trap. But if you treat it as a supplementary tool for everything else that you're doing, I think that's where this card really shines. So this card's good against like Enforcer, because like you can Zeus wipe, or you can like threaten with Zeus rather, and then like if the Enforcer pop, you can just hit the Enforcer. It's pretty decent in the mirror match if your opponent is not managing like the resources the best, or if like they're not respecting this card in general. You can like cut off a name for a Tri-Brigade, or you can like banish a Lyrilusc they're trying to revive with like Canaria Warbler or something. It's also good into like various other matchups. Think things like Drytron, Phantom Knight. Phantom Knight, it's like dependent on their hand. If they open a heavy PK hand, then this card's actually really weak. But it still is nice like mid to late game. Like if you were able to go second against Phantom Knight, you can clear their board, and then you can use this to either hit like the Celestial, or you can hit like whatever they're trying to target off their PK traps in Grave, which is pretty good. Or you can like hit the Torn Scale as it's trying to come back. So there's various utility. There's like other matchups where it's good too. So yeah, this card is just nice as like a way to back up all your other defensive measures, and not just as a hand trap. I mean, it is a hand trap, but its primary purpose is just to be kind of like a removal tool. So that's pretty good. Next up, we have 3 Nibiru. This is one that I'm not entirely certain on, but I do want, if I am going to play hand traps, I do want them to be high impact. Like you'll notice there's not really Ash in this list. And the reason like Imperm is in here is that it acts as kind of like a go second card, as well as just a flex hand trap. But yeah, Nibiru is like fine. I don't know if it's necessarily a staple, but it is good. Like if you're able to like, pair it with say like an Imperm, like it's great obviously there, but even just as a standalone card, it's fine into like PK and stuff, and like Sword Soul if they don't respect it, or if they're not able to go for the Shalfang play. So I think it's fine. In the mirror match, it's definitely not as good if they open well enough and they know what they're doing, which I think most people know the combos by now, which is great. But yeah, if your opponent opens like one of the Warbler combos, then you probably aren't going to be able to like use this card very effectively in the mirror, unless we pair it again with like just one of the other, blowout cards or hand traps. So like what you can do against the mirrors, like you can just, if you open Nib Imperm, you can like hold the Imperm for the Draco Future and then just nib the entire board, which is pretty debilitating. You do it before they make Ensemble, of course, because you don't want them to float back into a resource, but yeah, it's pretty strong if you can pull this off. So that hasn't come up for me yet, but maybe one day it will. Imperm, like I just mentioned, is a good like kind of supplementary hand trap, but also it's good as like a 6 card to draw. Kind of works as similarly to Chalice, a little bit weaker going second than Chalice, but still is pretty good at just like trading with something 1-for-1. And then these cards are just flex spots for going second, and they're also pretty decent going first. Drop It, I think, is in like pretty much everyone's list. It's a shame because I think even past the reprint, it's going to be expensive. But hey, you know, the reprint's coming, so that's pretty nice. But yeah, I don't have this card myself, so maybe I'll do a profile or once I resume real life play after my semester is over. I'll go ahead and kind of like play the deck with the cards that I physically own, and this is not one of them. So yeah, maybe that's something. If you guys are interested in it, please comment down below if you want to see kind of like a semi-budget list. That'd be pretty interesting to do, I think. But yeah, we have Chalice as well. This card is very popular right now. I've been back and forth in it, to be fair. It's not like a standout card because it doesn't win games by itself, but it definitely helps you push going second in games where otherwise you couldn't. So that's nice. So that rounds it out for the main deck. I really think that this is a solid main deck. The flex spots can always change, but right now I'm pretty satisfied with these. I did test out like Drill in the main deck. I want to test out like Gamma and stuff, just as like higher impact cards, which is something that I think is pretty useful to have right now because the low impact cards just don't do enough. Unless you have like a ton of them together, which you can switch the deck's focus and just play like 13 hand traps instead of just a mix of like 13 utility cards here. But I think this is generally pretty fine. But yeah, moving on to the extra, we got 2 recitals still. The third one has come up on rare occasions, but not enough for me to like switch up the extra deck to include it. Although a lot of people are playing it, so I don't fault you if you do choose to play 3. It's just that I think that the Xyz focus later into the game is not as strong unless if you're specifically going to make Zeus. And Assemble does a fine enough job as is doing that, so I didn't really run into too many issues with just the 2 recital. I think it's fine. Because like I mentioned earlier with Barrel Canary, if you are going into like your 3rd recital, they have to have like a very specific like setup for you to make Zeus like monster in defense position that you can just crash into or attack into rather without your monster losing in battle. So yeah, I think that the 3rd recital, while useful, like it gets you a lot of access to like the cards you would be getting already. Like I guess maybe one scenario where it comes up is if like your board gets wiped and that includes Robin adding back Turquoise board, then maybe it's fine because you can search Nova off that and that gets you back in your Tri-Brigade package, which is fair enough. But yeah, apart from that, I haven't really missed a recital like a ton. It's definitely like if there were 16 spots in the extra deck, I think that would be the 16th spot. It'd be competing with like the Tri-Brigade Link 3 Rugal or / Doom Eagle for that position. But yeah, there's a lot of cards that you could conceivably play in here. We have the Robin, of course, not too much to say, pretty ridiculous card. We have Assembled Nightingale, which pairs super well with Recital going second to just do the cheese OTKs. It always feels kind of dirty, but it is kind of the play style of like pure Lyrilusc for going second anyways, so it's definitely valid. We have the Utopia Draco feature package, which is pretty good. I think the thing I dislike about this the most is just the fact that it takes up the most amount of spaces to achieve just like a monster negation, which is like well protected, and it also puts a body in your field, which is nice. But yeah, like devoting 2 spots is very, very hefty. So like there were times where I've been thinking like, what if we cut this and we just played like the Link 3 and we made for Appaloosa instead, and we like kind of completely shifted the focus of the combos. I did think about that, and that's maybe something that we could try and do in the future moving forward. So who knows? Like if that becomes like a suitable replacement, maybe. Like this is better against like Lightning Storm to be sure, but yeah, that's something that's on the table. I haven't completely discounted that. Zeus, of course, pretty obvious. We have Almirage. This is definitely, I think, now better than Link Karibo. Just the more I've been testing with it. Sometimes because I open kit quite a bit, I'm not gonna lie, I open kit a fair amount, and you do just have to link her away. But also just like the protection is pretty useful. Comes up against like Lightning Storm and like the PK matchup and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty versatile. There are also certain combos where like if you've watched Yishan's channel, you can like Farigate to like, you can like normal summon Nerval, go into Farigate, turn this into Almirage, and then like you can just use Almirage to clear the zone, and then like you go search Kit and you special off the Farid, and then you vacate your zone with Almirage, which Link Creeper can't do. So there's like niche scenarios like that where that comes up. That's like generally if you're playing the Link 3, which I shifted the combos to where that kind of play isn't necessary in my build. But if you are playing that or playing those combos, then that's a useful thing to know. We have the DDO, pretty solid card. 2 Farid. The second one comes up a lot, almost every time. Because of the way that I'm prioritizing Oath now, I run through Farid and Shuraig, one of each turn 1. So that's why I'm playing 2 of them, because you want the second one just in case your board does get broken. Like there have been some crazy games on DB rated recently where I've gotten like double evenly matched into Lightning Storm or like double Dark Rulered, where yeah, like even if you have Oath and Grave, it's not enough to stop just a critical mass of Go Second cards, which can happen for sure because a lot of people are just packing Go Second cards. So you do definitely want those resources to help rebuild. And that's where the Tri-Brigade comes pretty handy because, again, the Lyriluscs tend to just funnel into the Zeus play after you burn through all 5 of these Xyz monsters, and then you just clean up with Zeus, which is fine. But you have a lot of options with the Tri-Brigade package afterwards, so that's pretty good. Similar, pretty obvious. The double Omen, again, I'll use the first one to search for Kara so you can put the Beast on field and the Beast Warrior in DDL to make Oath alive, and then the second one is just in case you need it for its actual removal. And then Appaloosa, this is the most flexible spot still. I find that I actually make this a lot more going second than going first because it helps you play through disruptions, and like if they're holding into Biru, if they're going first, then that's something useful to keep in mind too. So yeah, like this is good in Tri-Brigade heavy hands as well, when like you don't open the necessary resources to make Draco Future. That's where this comes up. I do make this the least out of the 15 in here. So again, you can swap this out for, I think good options are the third Recital, Downer Magician for Zeus, which I also have missed a little bit, the Tri-Brigade Link 3, or like Tri-Beast Link 3 rather. And I think those are like the main ones that I would consider playing in the spot of this. So that is going to be it for the extra deck. And then finally for the side, I can actually kind of talk about this a little bit more since I've done more testing with it. Again, I'll just kind of say that this is very dependent on how the format shifts and develops. But this is what I have so far right now. So we're on 3 Droll. This is for like the Mirror. It's like Drytron. It's like okay in like certain other matchups, but it's here kind of just like as an extra high impact hand trap. I was again testing this in the main deck for a while, but that was not very good, so I took it out. Still pretty solid. I dropped Lancia from the list. I just found that Lancia was fine, but it never actually completely hindered the matchups that I wanted it to be great against. I guess it's pretty decent against VW if they open weak, but even then they can still open like enough to just like pass on like Shen plus hand traps, which is pretty decent. Kind of same deal with PK. If they open decent enough, they can still like get to Rusty and then like Fog Blade, maybe some defensives. So like I think Lancia is a fine card. Also like in this matchup, like the mirror match, like you're cutting off half of the deck, but not the other half. So like Lancia is kind of an interesting one. It's still a good card, but I'm testing without it because I want cards that are like more, I guess, universally applicable in the fact that like they're always able to achieve their purpose, because like Lancia doesn't always just outright stop their turn, whereas like Dark Ruler and like Mystic Mine are always going to do what they're intended to do, which is like either force something or just like clear the board entirely. Speaking of which, we have the double Dark Ruler and 3 Mystic Mine. Yeah, Mystic Mine is pretty dirty, just because again you can perform the very, very infamous OTK combos with the Lyriluscs under the Mystic Mine, which is pretty impactful. I haven't actually used this card very much, so this is maybe something that you could consider dropping, but I think that just the way that it natively works with the deck is pretty insane. And then Dark Ruler, obviously, is just another go second card. There is the new card that we got announced in Brothers of Legend called Bird Strike. And this card is kind of like Dark Ruler, but your opponent can respond to it. However, it is searchable via Wagtail. So maybe it's a consideration as a one-of side card. I don't think it'll stay in the build. I'll test it for sure, But I mean, the problem with this card is that, again, your opponent has the ability to respond, so it's trading 1-for-1. Whereas like at the same, like at that point, it's kind of like Impermanent Chalice, but it's not a quick play, so you can't like just probably trade that way. And also, like, if you're playing 3 of it, then you might as well just play Dark Ruler, I feel. And if you're playing 1 of it to search for Wagtail, you have to like actually resolve Wagtail, which in a lot of cases, it's probably not going to get to that point, unless you have other cards that already help facilitate that. So this card is like an iffy one. Like, maybe it's good, but I'm not entirely sure yet. We'll have to do more testing. Next up is 3 Lightning Storm. This is like for back row decks, also for like PK. Well, it's been less against PK now that they're going for a Scythe combo, realistically. So that, I think, is something that maybe is a consideration to think about for sliding patterns. But yeah, I think this card is pretty decent. Against back row decks, though, I might swap it out because Lord of the Heavenly Prison is pretty popular. And so this could be swapped out for like Cosmic or Evenly. My initial reservation against Evenly was that, oh, it's really bad in Alancia, which people might side just because like you're still playing a heavy Tri-Brigade package. But I haven't run into Lancia very often, so this is maybe something that I'll consider swapping out, again, like for Evenly or Cosmic. Could be good. We have the Reboot for trap decks, and then these cards are going first. I'm not playing Harpy's Featherstorm. I think Featherstorm is fine. It's a good card for sure. Like it really does a good job at stopping your opponent's turn. It's just that I found that there are points where like you set up your board, sometimes it gets broken like by just like these really powerful like second cards, and then they like activate Fusion Destiny, and I'm like, oh well, this is kind of a problem, like, especially if like they supplement it with back row. Just because like they can slowly pick apart your board, and now you have to deal with like a really powerful grindy boss monster. Whereas like Anti-Spell does a good job at stopping, you know, stuff like Lightning Storm and Dark Ruler, while also, you know, just stopping like the cards to get to them, like Prosperity, for instance. Like that's another good one that it stops. And then like you can kind of just stop a lot of the starters that are present in a fair amount of decks, like Bird Call in the Mirror, for instance, or like, I don't know, Drytron Nova, or like the Sorzo Rhoda Emergence. So those types of cards, like this is pretty decent against. So I like Anti-Spell quite a bit. It's great as kind of just a defensive mechanism with like Imperial Order to just stop your opponent's ways to break your board. So that is going to be it. This is actually a bit less in-depth than my other Tri-Brigade Lyrilusc deck profile, but that's because in that one I kind of just explain a lot more of like what the functions of the cards themselves are. Here I'm just kind of focusing more on like ways to streamline the deck and what I've been finding and testing. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. Even though it's still a fairly long video, it's still like 27 minutes. But yeah, we're going to wrap it up here. If you guys have any suggestions or feedback, comments, you know, are always welcome, of course. But that's going to be for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys.